state actors and state sponsored by a government against their own people or in support of international. Another typology contains the following categories: revolutionary, political, nationalistic, cause-based, environmental, state-sponsored, or genocide. About the motives, I may give a rapid idea, but the details will be given by Professor Zinab Bishry after I complete my talk. Argan 2004 found that three motivational themes appear to be prominent and consistent. Number one, perceived injustice, which has long been recognized as a central factor in understanding violence generally and terrorism especially. Number two, there is a diffusion of identity. Identity is a developed stable sense of self and resolved security in one's basic values, attitudes, and beliefs. And if there is again lots of sense of belonging and connectedness and affiliation to any group. These are the main motivational issues. There are many theories explaining terrorism. The psychoanalytical theory was believed to be driven by unconscious motives and impulses which arise from hostility towards one's parents, and that terrorism is the product of early abuse and maltreatment. Narcissism claimed that terrorist behavior was rooted in a personality defect that produced a damaged sense of self. The essence of pathological narcissism is an overvaluing of self and devaluing of others. The frustration-aggression hypothesis argues that much terrorist behavior is a response to frustration of various political, economic, and personal needs or objectives. The developmental model terrorists are often the products of overly permissive wealthy families with whom they were in conflict, had inconsistent mothering, or were isolated from. This does not mean that poverty is always there, but maybe even wealthy people can do it. The social learning theory, it is not a coincidence that many terrorists come from places where peace is not the norm. Places like the Middle East or Northern Ireland, where all the present generation of young people have known is a regular, extreme, well-publicized violence. Violence could be the norm for such young people, whether it is on a wide scale or within a smaller community or family, may come to be considered the normal response to achieve objectives. The behavioral model, here most terrorists are heroes to someone, and according to this model, such reinforcement increases the likelihood of terrorist behavior. Most, but not all, terrorists want and need that support. The sociological model believes in the nurture, not the nature, and see terrorists as driven by political ideology and political grievances. The economic model, some groups choose the terror option because it is relatively inexpensive and yet can have huge effects. Here, the effect of feminism, which is new in the present era, terrorist violence is more likely to be carried out by men than by women. With the rise of feminism, this is changing. Women have been able to exploit their image of non-violence and weakness to escape the detection and carry out terrorist activities. About the terrorist personality, which is given in detail by Professor Abdel, will come in a few minutes. Andrew Sick observed that after researches the researchers failed to find any strong links between terrorism and major psychopathology. A trend has emerged which asserts that terrorists possess many of the traits of pathological personalities, but do not possess the actual clinical disorders. This development has effectively tainted terrorists with a pathology overall, without offering any way to easily test or refute the accusation. This is my entry, thank you for it, and I have the pleasure to introduce Professor Zinab Bishry in place of Professor Hamid, will present her talk.
Dear colleague, I'll talk about what is behind terrorism. Why do some individuals decide to break with society and embark on a career in terrorism? This approach is partly theoretical because terrorists are not accessible to be examined. Data are difficult to be obtained. This approach is from our culture's perspectives, could not be generalized. This presentation does not presume to have scientific validity, but it does provide a preliminary framework for further research.
Good afternoon. It's really difficult actually to talk about terrorism and terrorists, especially from the cross-cultural views and cross-cultural perspectives. It's more difficult also to try to diagnose the terrorist and try to classify who is the terrorist and who is not the terrorist. And also, it's also a very difficult situation for psychiatrists to try to diagnose terrorists as having a mentally ill disorders or something like that. So I will go first to ask who is the terrorist actually. Is he a mentally ill patient, disorders, psychiatric patients? Is he a completely normal person having certain views and certain ideas? Is he suffering from a personality disorders? Or the terrorist is a mix of all? There is different beliefs about terrorism and terrorists according to different views and different culture. Somebody think that they are psychotic and mentally ill, somebody think that they are personality disorders, somebody think that the terrorist is the result of frustration, poverty, maybe a victim of either a physical or psychological abuse early in his life, or maybe it's a reaction to inequality. Actually, I think, and somebody think that religious fanatics in different religions, there is in every religion there is some fanatics who are implementing their ideology and try to implement their ideology all over their place. So I think the terrorist should be a difficult issue to diagnose. I think the terrorist is a combination of all of this. First of all, we have to diagnose or to differentiate between the leadership of terrorism and the following of terrorism. The leaders in the terrorist leaders are influential, very persuasive, charismatic, and intelligent, so they can lead. Controlling personal disorder, we think that in the relation to personal disorder, the leader should be a paranoid personal disorder or narcissistic personal disorder. Mental illness, if we try to diagnose a terrorist as a mental illness, the most likely diagnosis can be a delusional disorder. the main critique for diagnosing the terrorist as a mental ill patient, that they should not be suffering from serious psychopathological problems because they have the ability to plan, to implement their ideas, and to act on it. So actually, to diagnose terrorists as a mental ill patient, this is an underestimation of their abilities. The followers should be an easy-suggested person, less intelligent and submissive. If we are talking about personality disorders, we are talking about independent personality, a borderline personality, antisocial and schizotype types of personality. Concerning the mental illness, we are talking about paranoid schizophrenia, chronic depression, maybe playing a terrorist role, maybe self-destructive behavior, some sort of self-destructive behavior, some sort of parasuicide behavior, delusional disorder, especially the shared delusions, if the leader terrorist has the idea and he can implement his idea and he can persuade the others to share his idea, and bipolar disorder. So who is the terrorist? Leaders in comparison to general population are less likely to suffer from mental illness, while the followers seem to suffer more mental illness than the leaders. So I think this is a very important idea. If leader is not mentally ill, so why do a person like to hurt people? Why do a person like to kill people? Maybe it's ideology. We are suffering since a very long time, since the beginning of the 19th century, about different ideologies and different set of ideas that produce violence in every area. The religion-based concepts. And this is another very important issue. There's a quotation, very nice quotation, that the faith unite people and religions divides people. Yes, fanatics in every religion are dividing people, are dragging people toward terrorism, dragging people toward violence. Another very important view is the group values and belief. Group values concerning land, concerning the concepts, concerning the culture, and the fight for it. What you have to think about that the goal of the terrorist action are goal-directed. There is no terrorist action without a goal. Understanding their beliefs, understanding their motivations, and the way they think will help to combat their terrorism. They regard their behavior as honorable, courageous, justifiable, and are freedom fighters. So you have to explain to the general population, you have to explain to the followers that this is not the way of freedom fighters, this is not the way of gaining your rights, this is not the way. Mental challenging of the belief of the leaders, and even though it's vital to combat them. We don't think that only by force we can combat terrorism. We don't think that only by restrictions, by regulations, you can fight terrorism. You have to fight terrorism by fighting their ideas, the way they think, the way they believe. If you can fight this way, if you can make the reverse brainwashing of this terrorist, I think you can combat terrorism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Naser. Now,
in this respect, who are the victims of terrorism? For simplicity, I divided the victims of terrorism into three types. First, the primary victims, secondary victims, and then the tertiary victims. The primary victims of terrorism are those people who have been directly injured by the terroristic attack. Those who are injured or witnessing somebody killed or something like this. The secondary victims of terrorism are those who have not been directly injured, but they have some relative or somebody who is related to them who had been a direct victim, so they are relative of primary victims of terrorism. We can think that the primary or secondary victims are the most important ones, but to my mind, the tertiary victims are the most important. Those are persons who are not being directly or indirectly victimized by the terrorist attack, but they are living in the vicinity of a terroristic area. For example, how many people have been directly or indirectly victimized by a terrorist attack? Very few, tens, mostly hundreds. But how many people are tertiary victims of terrorism? It's not surprising that you'll find one of the patients coming to you, I stopped watching the movie, especially the movies regarding the news channels. I stopped seeing the CNN, Al Jazeera, because bad news, I get depressed. Even the normal people, they get depressed when they are watching these news. So what about the psychiatric patients? Now the question is there an increased psychiatric morbidity with terrorism? Does the era of terrorism in the modern era increases the likelihood for psychiatric disorders? If the answer is yes, what are the factors affecting this? We have, of course, a lot of factors. We have first the biological vulnerability, we have the vulnerability in the personality, we have whether these experiences and early ones in the late life, we have also the coping styles of people, we have the social support system, and we have also the cultural factors, the meaning of stress. This attack, what does it mean for us? This act, what does it mean for people there? And there are also a lot of other factors. For simplicity, we'll divide the psychiatric morbidity in victims of terrorism into two types. First, patients who are not known to be psychiatric patients, patients without any past history of psychiatric disorder. And here we can divide them into adults and children, because of course the impact on children will be much greater. For adults, of course, we are all familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder, following, for example, September 11th attacks or any terroristic act in any territory of the world. We have also the exacerbation of anxiety disorders, anticipating that there will be an act, a feeling of insecurity, which would raise the likelihood of any anxiety disorders, whether panic, generalized anxiety, or specific phobias. I have patients who have a specific phobia, for example, to go to the theater or cinema because they have a fear that there might be an explosion in this area. So we might be faced with certain specific phobias related to terrorism. We have also the adjustment disorder in people who are directly or indirectly victimized by a terroristic attack. For children, the story is different. We might have in children the acute stress reaction. We might have sleep disorders. So many children, I face this problem. So many children in a terroristic territory might have nightmares, sleep disorders. It's very important. Phobia. And this phobia will be translated directly into a behavior. The child is afraid to go to school because he's afraid that it might be a terroristic act in the school. So we might be faced with academic deterioration. But most importantly, when the children are facing such aggressive behaviors, violent behaviors in the movies, we can think the other way. Is it some sort of vicarious learning? Does the child will learn this aggression? So we might be afraid of the identification of the aggression, which is another problem to be faced in children. The other group, psychiatric patients. Whenever you have a terroristic attack, you will be faced with symptom exacerbation or increased relapse rate. Of course, we have different models to explain this. The model of stress diathesis model and other models, but it's not surprising that you'll find a patient with depression who comes into a relapse because he is faced with such an attack.
Good afternoon for all of you. Thank you very much for your interest to attend this workshop. And I hope to share some experience between us. I will talk about Islam and terrorism, myths and facts. Actually, I don't know what is your point of view. Is this topic related or not related to terrorism? But we will see during the discussion. Myth about Islam. Muhammad is a terrorist. Muhammad is a prophet of Islam. Islam is a religion that encourages terrorism. All Muslims are fundamentalists and terrorists. Islam spreads war. Muslims kill women, children, and civilian people. What is Islam? In fact, Islam is one of the three major world religions along with Judaism and Christianity that profess monotheism or the belief in a single God. And this is the definition written in the Microsoft Encarta Encyclopedia. The Arabic name for God, Allah, refers to the same God worshipped by Jews and Christian people. In the Arabic language, the word Islam means submission, and in another meaning means peace. The Muslim community nowadays comprises about 1 billion followers on all 5 continents, and Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. Muslims are spread over 40 predominantly Muslim countries. What about Islam and the relation to others? Islam respects humanity and human rights since 1400 years. Islam respects all other religions. Islam don't force people to be Muslims. Islam allows marriage of Muslim people or Muslim men to Christian and Jewish women. Prophet Muhammad dealt peacefully with Christians and Jewish. Islam gave women and the children more rights than currently available in all countries. For example, Muslim women have separate financial identity. Muslim women don't change their names with marriage. Muslim women have the right to be divorced at any time and without any reasons. Muslim women are responsible, Muslim men are responsible financially about the women. Islamic view of September 11, London and Madrid explosions, there is no argument between Muslims as regard to the terroristic nature of these attacks. It is terrorism, whatever who is responsible, Bin Laden, Zawahiri or anyone, it is a terroristic attacks. How can Islam be called a religion of peace when it was spread by sword? This is a myth. Was Islam spread by sword? The fact, Muslim ruled Spain for about 800 years. The Muslim in Spain never used the sword to force the people to convert from their religions to Islam. More than 14 million Arabs are Coptic Christians, and they are not forced to be Muslims. The Muslims ruled India for about 1,000 years, and if they wanted, they had the power of converting each and every non-Muslim in India to Islam. Today, more than 80% of the population in India are not Muslims. The fastest growing religion in America is Islam, and the fastest growing religion in Europe is Islam, which is what is forcing people in the West to accept Islam. Also, Indonesia is the largest Islamic country. Malaysia also is one of the Islamic countries, and there are no military forces for Islam in these regions, and they are all choose Islam in the past. The Quran, the holy book of Islam, says about the choice of religion, let there be no compulsion in religion. In Arabic, la ikrah fi din, no compulsion in religion. Also, the holy book of Muslims say, invite all to the way of the Lord with wisdom and beautiful preaching, and argue with them in ways that are best and most gracious. This is the way Islam invites people to be Muslims. Islamic instructions during the wars: don't cut a tree. This is instructions for the soldiers during wars. Don't cut a tree, don't terrify women and children, don't stab or kill from the back, don't kill animals, this, then this, then this. Also, it is from the holy book of Muslims. It is written in Arabic. This is during the Islamic wars. All Islamic wars during the life of Prophet Muhammad, the deaths were few hundreds, only few hundreds. And if we imagine today how many killed with single bomb from B-52 fighter, or from friendly fire, or from intelligent bombs, it will be more and more and more. Another myth: all Muslims are fundamentalists and terrorists. Every sentence starts with all in our life and in our world currently is wrong. There is no all today. Islam and the Muslims. Islam is different from Muslims, and this is very important. Some people say, if you want to know Islam, search and read about Islam, but don't look to Muslims. Why? Because under Syria, colonial movements and dictatorship control of Muslim countries, still they are suffering and growing. Most of Muslims don't talk English in a proper way, so it is difficult to communicate with them and to understand their ideology and behaviors. The fact Muslim stereotypes are perpetuated in every form of the media, accompanied by gross misinformation about Islam and Muslims. And this photo is a prototype of Muslim in the minds of some people from all over the world. Actually, it is a myth, and it's a stereotype propagated by the media. When any bomb blast take place anywhere, the first people to be accused without proof are invariably the Muslims. This appears as headline in the news. Later, when they find that non-Muslims were responsible, it appears as insignificant news items. And the most famous example for this, the Oklahoma explosion. A 50-year-old Muslim marries a 15-year-old girl after taking permission from her and her family, it appears on the front page of the news. But when a 50-year-old non-Muslim raped a 6-year-old girl, it may appear in the news briefs and not in the main page. In fact, such misinformation and false propaganda often leads to discrimination and acts of violence against Muslims. There are black sheep in every community. There are some Muslims who are dishonest, unreliable, who cheat, but the media projects this as though only Muslims are involved in such activity. There are black sheep in every community, not only in Muslim community. Muslims are more than 1 billion. They are not homogeneous group, the same like Christians and other religions. The Islam itself refused many Muslim groups. The Muslim countries are fighting against terrorism more than 20 years before September 11. Don't judge the car by its driver. We cannot judge Islam by its followers. If you want to judge how good Islam is, then judge it according to its original sources, the Holy Book, Quran, and Sahih Hadith. Islam and the historians, there are several non-Muslim historians who have acclaimed that Prophet Muhammad was the best human being, according to Michel H. Hart, who wrote the book, The 100 Most Influential Men in History. The topmost position was for Prophet Muhammad. There are several such examples of non-Muslims paying great tributes to the Prophet, like Thomas Carlyle and Lamartine, and a lot of them. What about freedom fighters or anti-colonialist activity? Muslims, the same like all other people elsewhere in the world, believe that struggle against oppression and self-defense are not only legitimate but also required, and at the same time, killing of innocent people is irreligious in Islam and morally and ethically forbidden. Conclusion: there is no special association between religion and violence. Many of the terrorist groups since World War II have been radical socialist groups with no religious roots. Islam is stigmatized by the media and false propaganda. Islam is a peaceful religion. Terrorism has no nationality and no religion. Thank you for all of you.
Thank you very much, Professor Yasser. I think you have something else to add as regards at the end.
Yes, that's after discussion, I think.
How to combat terrorists. Okay. Education, fighting ignorance, and improving socio-economic status, fighting poverty, are vital in the fight against terrorism. Anybody want to comment on that? Education and fighting against poverty could be helpful in combating terrorism. Yes.
Definitely, one of the most important aspects of terrorism is education and poverty. Lack of education or some sort of the curriculum learning or in schools and in universities may be related to some beliefs and to misbeliefs that lead to terrorism. So one of the most important aspects is education. I think in all over the world we should learn people through curriculums in different levels and different grades of education about how to live peacefully, how to solve problems, and how to be balanced in judging everything around us. Also, as regard to the public.
I don't think we can agree all on this statement because I don't think there is a parallel correlation between poverty, lack of education, and terrorism, because we can see such terrorist attacks from people who are highly educated. For example, from those, those who are accused to be terrorists have high degrees of education. They are doctors, they are physicians. I don't think there is a parallel correlation, or we don't have evidence that education will improve. The academic education, I mean, but my point of view is we need moral and spiritual education rather than academic education. That's my point of view.
He answers the question of all Muslims. But the second question is the source of weakness and continued this attack on people. The first and all, the injustice was shown. Okay, on the Palestinian people, nobody can deny. Nobody can deny. You speak about management or strict etiology of bombardment. But the situation, nobody can understand why now all civilians in Gaza Strip is confined back in prison, and nobody in the world can speak or can think just to give food or shelter or medicine, including medicine and surgical operation. How can you deny?
I'm Jared Razek from Canada, and I certainly don't think I would be an expert on the subject, though I have traveled extensively in the Middle East and Muslim countries. One thing that shapes identities and behaviors, especially amongst adolescents, is what heroes do we have? What idealized figures do we have? And it would seem to me that the world, Muslim and non-Muslim, needs the emergence of a Nelson Mandela, a Dalai Lama, within the Muslim world, not to say that there isn't injustice, there is injustice everywhere, but the youth need a hero that they can identify with that leads a different path. I believe that the world came close with Anwar Sadat, but he was not a religious figure, and sadly he met a terrible fate. But I'm wondering if social psychiatrists within the Muslim world have any, I know you said to avoid politics, but social psychiatry, is there anything that can be done to try and facilitate the development of a religious Muslim version of an Anwar Sadat or Nelson Mandela, or Dalai Lama is probably a better version of that.
Thank you very much for your comments. Please.
Yeah, it's sort of a corollary to that question. I think I definitely agree with the first speaker's, just sitting on the right, description of the mischaracterization of Islam in Western media, and I think that's definitely the fact that there is a lot of demonization that goes on. At the same time, it seems that there's certainly the impression, I think, that there's been some caution about amongst certain religious leaders to sort of wholeheartedly denounce things like suicide bombing and just say this is against Islam. I don't know what the correct language would be, but issue a fatwa or something like that. And I guess that's sort of a larger political religious question that I'm certainly not equipped to answer or speculate on, but I'm wondering what the role of psychiatrists can be in working with religious leaders, religious educators to create a more inclusive, tolerant image for Islam and education amongst the youth. Because I think in the States, I think that mental health professionals do work quite a bit with Christian ministers and rabbis for those kinds of aims.
They should not be fanatics.
Right, exactly.
Actually, Egypt was... Actually, yes, actually, Egypt, we are starting now to have some peaceful leaders. Like, I don't know if you heard about the guy named Amr Khalid. Amr Khalid is a very peaceful leader concerning Islam. He's dealing like the Dalai, the same attitudes. He's very modest, he's very liberal, he's very accepting other people. He denies completely the acts of violence against civilians, and he thinks that in order to give a proper interaction with others, you have to begin with you.
Trapped into debates about what is what, and that will still be a good debate and a healthy debate, but it would not be the right forum for it. That would be a political debate, not a psychiatric debate. I think as psychiatrists, if we could just focus more on behaviors of people that we are concerned about, whether behaviors and consequences to victims of acts of war that are considered to be attacks against civilians in various settings, and the attackers, and especially those who would reach the breaking point of giving up their lives in a very deliberate way. Most soldiers who go to war, while they have the conception and the awareness that they may very well die in the process of the battle, they do not intend to die. They intend to survive. They do everything they can to survive in the process of carrying out their military duty or tasks as they are dictated to them by their commander. When a person reaches a point of accepting a command of deliberately killing himself in the process, it does, in my opinion, from a psychiatric standpoint, reach a different level of threshold that involves belief, that involves suggestibility, that involves a sense about the value of life or the value of death. And those are phenomena, and many others that I didn't mention, that I'm sure many more experts would have more to say about. Those are phenomena that should be the study of psychiatry and are certainly in the realm of the psychiatric field, and should be a discussion of this forum, whether it is the consequences to the victims or the process leading the perpetrator.
I just want to add something.
Well, I probably butchered it a bit, but it means a peace that's from the devil.
Yes, he's quoting a proverb.
I have a question, follow-up on the gentleman's comment here. I am looking at the schedule of the APA component activities, and I found two meetings. One's called the Middle East Discussion Group, another one is called the Caucus on Middle Eastern Kids. I suppose that people in this room are interested in the subject. Has anyone learned anything about it, or does anyone know anything about what happens there? No one in the audience either?
You mean the kids?
These are meetings and groups that are organized by the APA. They are called APA component activities. So there's a caucus, obviously, that is dealing with Middle Eastern kids, social issues. And there's another group that is meeting about a Middle East discussion. It would be useful, I think, for some of the organizers maybe to pursue this and learn more about it.
Let me just comment on this issue of terrorism, violence, etc. I do agree with the colleague from Egypt who tried to limit this discussion in the parallel of psychiatry. But I think, on the other hand, it is important to ask ourselves at what point does someone decide to take away his life and also target others. I mean, humiliation is one of the things which we see Nobody would dare to just take away his life and target others. And psychiatrists deal with problems which are the consequences of war, terrorism, etc. But much more than that. I think these are problems which are created in context, and the context is political. Okay? As a matter of public health policy, psychiatrists have to be able to not only deal with the consequences, anxiety, depression, PTSD, etc., but also we have, as members of society, as individuals, as groups, etc., or as professionals, the duty to communicate this. Where do these problems come from? Why do these problems emerge? Why did that a normal person, I have seen on television, a 65-year-old woman, Palestinian, mother of 5 children, taking away her life? I mean, at what point did she decide to do that? Why? Why don't you ask these questions? And is it not appropriate for us as professionals to also see this problem on a larger scale and say, something has to happen. We are not only here to deal with consequences. We have to be able, as a matter of public policy also, public health policy, etc., preventively. Is it not appropriate for psychiatrists all over the world, wherever they are, to take also human rights issues without being committed politically? I mean, this is a matter of humanity. This is how you can prevent things from festering to such an extent. And this is the kind of attitude I have. I work in Holland.